first round in Modern, or in Standard today, with Adrian Sullivan, though recovering. A win last round keeps him in the undefeated.
This earlier in the tournament, it's undesirable to have a draw, but it's far from the end of the world.
Turn 1 from Steven will be a green belt Rampager, comes back to his hand, and he gets an energy. Now from Steven's side, because he's slowed down the deck, playing more removal, playing some main deck vehicles, some tireless trackers, that might actually cost him in this matchup.
He does just want to go fast because he can make relatively large creatures. You have these synergies with Winding Constrictor, but Metalwork Colossus is generally bigger than all that stuff.
Aether Hub from Steven will make Long Tusk Hub. Now because that turn 1 Rampager, he does have 2 energy at the ready. Might not know what he's up against yet. He's not making the counter, so to play around Magma Spray here.
Yeah, turn 1 Spire Bluff Canal. That looks like it could very well be a Magma Spray deck. Though it's going to change pretty quickly here as you see more stuff from Jack. He can feign blue-red control for a time, but a lot of his cards just don't fit the bill.
Right, playing Aether Hub there, getting an energy. That one you sometimes see in blue-red.
Yeah, if they're playing Harnessed Lightning, it certainly makes sense to have access to the energy land.
Now he's going to tap down here maybe for a 2-mana artifact. By tapping here, he could take a lot of damage from Steven's side. He's showing that he doesn't have a kill spell.
And now that Steven has the Long Tusk Hub, he can start spending energy.
Yeah.
He can just start using the Greenbelt Rampager to just make more energy if he keeps spending all the stuff that he has.
Glint Nest Crane from Jack shows Prophetic Prism. I mean, what Jack needs to avoid is if Steven's play here is Winding Constrictor into the Greenbelt Rampager, there is so much damage that could come out of this board.
Yep, with the Constrictor, assuming that he doesn't have to spend any energy to cast it, he can immediately make the Cub into a 4/4.
Right, then it hits, gets 3 energy, makes Rampager. Like, when you start being able to bounce Rampager for 2 energy and spend it immediately and just keep redoing that, it's so much damage.
Yep.
We see a swing from Steven, a block from Jack, and the Cub will become a 3/3, taking down the Glint Nest Crane. This is a nice position here for Jack. It's the only response Steven had was Rampager into Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
I like the aggressive chump block there from Jack. He's not going to win by chipping in with Cranes.
Well, I'd like it slows down Steven's deck because in this situation, if there's no block, remember when Long Tusk Cub hits, Steven gets 2 energy.
Right.
Upkeep, Steven will spend energy to draw an extra card with Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Jack's last play was just Cultivator's Caravan. Right now, his draw looks like it may not be fast enough.
And that's what a lot of Jack's turn 3s are going to look like. It does take some time to get the threshold of non-creature artifacts to reduce the cost of your Colossus.
For removal in the main deck, Jack has 4 copies of Fatal Push. That's actually it, outside of these Kozilek's returns.
Castable off of Caravan if he has one, though he has multiple creatures that he has to deal with now.
Tireless Tracker and a land for Steven.
You have to imagine that if he had a Fatal Push, there's a lot of incentive to just use that on the Glint Sleeve Siphoner right away, so that Steven wouldn't be able to draw that card on his upkeep.
Yeah, or use it on the Cub. We would have seen it. There's no reason to hold on to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll see black-green decks with multiple copies of Blossoming Defense in the main. So if Jack did have the kill spell, he would have likely used it main phase to respect that.
Yep.
But here's the clue token from Steven.
He's got a Jacob Ba and a Max McVitie. Pretty fitting for an invitational. Though I don't expect any elf warriors to be joining the fray.
Not in Standard. Fatal Push among the cards in Steven's hand. That one's not particularly live in this matchup.
Yeah, best he can do is remove those chump blocking Cranes.
Swing here from Steven. Gets 1 energy off the Siphoner. Long Tusk Cub hits. That'll go up to 3 energy. See if he spends it on the Cub. So right now he could cast the Rampager and use that energy to make it stay. Or if he spends the energy before casting it, he could get an additional energy.
There's not a particularly strong argument against developing your board, getting the Rampager on the battlefield.
Yeah.
You have to be wondering how much Steven knows what he's playing against. These cards are all consistent with Metalwork Colossus. Does he know that specifically that's what he's playing against?
So he's going to spend and then bounce the Rampager. This way he actually gets to still use his Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
You don't have to sell me on drawing extra cards.
And for Jack, he'll cast Hedron Archive. Then Kozilek's Return for 2. And he's going to get this while Steven is tapped down. So Tireless Tracker actually is caught.
Yeah, got the tracker, got the Siphoner. The Cub's already a 4/4, though. Even triggering the return from the graveyard, unlikely to deal with that one in this game.
Right. I mean, he has 2 energy to make it a 5/5, and when it connects, a 6/6.
Yep.
Though with that turn, you see Jack has 4 lands now. If you count his 2 artifacts, he can make 7 mana next turn. He will be able to cast 1 or maybe even multiple Metalwork Colossus.
And they are discounted by 7.
Right. They cost 4. So yeah, with 1 untapped land, he can make 2.
That would be quite the position. Depending what Steven commits into the Kozilek's Return, that could be some nice upside. And then the Colossus being larger than the Cub, well, it doesn't really matter if you kill it if you just block it indefinitely.
Yeah, and you're talking before about having to sell you on drawing extra cards. Do want to point out here, however, that Steven may have been punished for going for that extra card. If he just makes the 3/4 last turn, he has a lot more damage here.
Yeah, and part of the argument for keeping it in your hand and using it to just generate energy was that it didn't actually increase his clock if nothing changed. The problem is something changed, something pretty significant.
Yeah. And it looks like Steven's pushing all in on this Long Tusk Cub. So he's using Greenbelt Rampager to make 2 energy, then spends it to pump Long Tusk Cub and continues casting Rampager. So by doing this, he moved the Cub up to a 6/6 and now is set to make it a 7/7.
That'll really limit Jack's window to find a Colossus.
Right.
But it doesn't make it any worse of a top deck.
Yeah, the swing puts Jack to 8, and Steven gets 2 energy. So with no blocker, Jack is dead. Hedron Archive will cast Prophetic Prism. Jack draws. Even something like Elder Deep Fiend here would be really strong. I don't know if he has the mana. He may not have the mana for it anymore. Prism, another Prophetic Prism. Has he found a Colossus, though? That's the question. Down to just 4 mana is Jack. And there's Metalwork Colossus, sacrificing Sanctum of Ugin. You see, between Cultist Caravan, Hedron Archive, and the 2 Prophetic Prisms, he does not have to pay any mana for the Colossus.
Free 10/10 is a very good price. Sign me up for that one all day.
Yeah, the Grixis Colossus deck, though a little slow, is very consistent in what it does.
Once it gets set up, just gets to start casting a lot of 10/10s.
Yeah, between Inventor's Fair, Sanctum of Ugin, it is good at this. Another Cultivator's Caravan for Jack, another Prophetic Prism. And now he will pass back to Steven.
Well, the nice thing about having 2 Colossus, you force Steven to commit more creatures onto the board here, because this Cub, if Jack just attacks with both Colossus, it's got a chump block. Though you don't have to make too much of an argument for having 2 10/10s being good.
Fatal Push, Grasp of Darkness in Steven's hand, none of those will help.
Fatal Push is such a powerful Magic card, but you do end up playing some number of games where it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, unlike Lightning Bolt, when your opponent's not playing creatures, it doesn't have an extra utility.
Right, yeah, this is 3 Lightning Bolt territory. There's a reason that that card is not always legal in Standard. It's very pushed power level. Part of a 5-card cycle with Ancestral Recall and Dark Ritual.
Yeah, I like Healing Salve.
And Giant Growth.
You know, it's like if Fatal Push then said, 1 black, deal 2 to target player, Revolt, deal 4, and just as another mode.
Now there's a card.
Now that's a card.
Sign me up for that.
Aethersphere Harvester is the play from Steven. Because Harvester has lifelink, that may buy Steven an extra turn. Or I guess can be given lifelink. The Long Tusk Cub is up to a 7/7 right now with 4 energy in reserve. So Steven's close to having the Cub be big enough to just win combat against a Colossus, but it's not all the way there.
It also has the 2 Colossus problem if it wants to attack.
Right. Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot from Jack Keifer.
The Harvester does have flying, though.
Right, he draws Kozilek's Return. Swings, looks like, for 20. That should force a block.
I would imagine.
Remaining cards here looks like Jack with Fatal Push picked up in hand and Kozilek's Return. If indeed that is Fatal Push, then it should be, it's unlikely here. And here's the play. Steven's going to crew Aethersphere Harvester, and Jack should win the game right here. He sacks Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot to turn on Revolt, goes to 6, and I believe he's going to Fatal Push down the vehicle, and Steven will take 20.
Pretty clean, lethal in one swing.
A quick turnaround for Jack Keifer, and with it, he will take game 1. It is Grixis Colossus.
Yeah, and Steven, he did have a relatively quick draw. He had enough of his synergies going. He had the kind of timeline that you would expect with this deck. Jack just had enough time, and he had the Colossus. If he didn't have that, the game was over on turn 5. But he was able to stabilize and turn things right around.
All right, so with Grixis Colossus up a game, we're going to go ahead and look at some of the sideboard options for each player. On Steven's side, he has 3 copies of Transgress the Mind, 2 Appetite for the Unnatural, 2 Gonti, 2 Murder, 2 Ob Nixilis Reignited, 2 copies of To the Slaughter, and 2 copies of Yahenni's Expertise.
So there's a couple slam dunks here. You have the 3 Transgress the Mind, the 2 Appetite for the Unnatural.
Yeah, those seem great.
These both line up. Yeah, these are going to trade up on mana in a lot of cases. Deal with a lot of this high-end stuff from Jack and really stunt his growth. The Appetite in particular, tagging Hedron Archive the turn it comes down is quite the exchange.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces of this puzzle for Jack's deck, whether it's the big mana accelerant or the first Metalwork Colossus. Things that when you take that piece out of the puzzle, his hands don't do as much.
And then for Steven, he does have 3 main deck Fatal Push and 3 Grasp of Darkness. Certainly wants to get rid of all of that stuff. So you only have 5 cards with those. You don't really want to fight the fight of dealing with Colossus when it's on the battlefield. It is a recursive card. You might have already gotten swept with Kozilek's Return at that point.
Right.
So you might see Gonti coming in for that reason.
It does attack. Yeah, you're going to see Gonti or Ob Nixilis. And I think I agree with you here. I might just go for the cheaper option.
Yep.
On Jack Keifer's side, 3 copies of Metallic Rebuke, 2 Barrel's Expertise, 2 Fragmentize, 2 Unlicensed Disintegration, and then a set of one-ofs: Battle at the Bridge, Chandra Flamecaller, Herald of Anguish, Negate, Ob Nixilis Reignited, and Walking Ballista.
Barrel's Expertise, that's certainly the most powerful option.
This is the card that when I played a lot of green-black energy, I was the most scared of in just about any matchup it came in.
If you spent a lot of energy making your Long Tusk Cub large and it gets bounced, that's a pretty big field bad. Not to mention resetting your board for 5 mana.
Yeah, black-green is all about playing a very efficient card each turn. So when you bounce 3 of them and then for what ends up being 1 mana, it's so hard to come back.
Unlicensed Disintegration is a clean answer to these creatures. That one seems excellent in this kind of matchup.
Right.
Chandra Flamecaller, if you have it on time, can deal with a lot of creatures. It won't always line up perfectly, so that one is not as good as the other options, but for sure you're going to see these removal spells coming in. Possibly the Ob Nixilis as well. That seems like a totally fine turn 3 play. You're still going to be wanting to set up Kozilek's Return, trigger Kozilek's Return from the graveyard, but Ob Nixilis is a reasonable removal spell.
All right, so over StarCityGames.com, we have our weekly sale every week. That's a different select item for sale on our store every week. This week, we've been having 15% off select Modern cards. You can find out those over on the site. Now, those will be on sale all weekend. So you'll be able to get them today through Sunday. On Monday morning, though, check in also on our site as we have next week's sale. You can find all that at starcitygames.com/weekly sale.
You can always find some nice goodies there. Sometimes it takes some time to get all the cards for a Modern deck, so good to see how to take advantage of to staple a deck together.
All right, so at 5:01, up a game. This looks like it is the best invitational so far here for Jack Keifer. What you have to figure is going to be the first of many. The 15-year-old from Boulder, Colorado of Team Card Hoarder, one of the 3 Keifer brothers. He's the middle brother, though now the second one of them to have qualified, I believe, qualified for the Pro Tour just recently.
Apparently a pretty big pie enthusiast, of course referring to the mathematical figure, not the dessert. which he very well might be interested in. You know, I don't. You'd have to ask him, but he might not tell you. He's kind of a soft-spoken kid.
All right. Still looking for that first open top 8. What a chance it would be if it happened at the Invitational?
Oh yeah. Jack frequently comes out to these tournaments with his younger brother Quinn and his older brother Lucas. Certainly a sibling rivalry happening with Lucas. You know, both of them this last year had qualified for their first Pro Tour, both competing for titles and things like that.
Now Lucas played Amonkhet, was it? Or that's coming up?
It's coming up.
Okay, Lucas is coming up. All right. Turn 1, Attune from Steven. Will find himself a swamp. Back over. Jack leading on a swamp of his own. Could represent Fatal Push.
Being on the draw and having Fatal Push that kills their 2-mana spell,
Fatal
that's
Push,
a nice spot to be.
Fatal Push is good against this deck. Let's hope they don't have too many of them.
There's no really real solution to that problem. You just have to keep casting creatures.
Steven will cast Transgress the Mind. Good look at Jack's hand. He's got 2 more lands. Cultivator's Caravan, Metalwork Colossus, Unlicensed Disintegration, and Sky Sovereign.
And I do like firing off the Transgress here on turn 2 for a couple reasons. There's often an incentive to wait on your discard spell, give your opponent some time to draw the 4 mana or 11 mana card that you actually want to hit. But the thing is, if you just cast a creature on turn 2 and Jack has Fatal Push, that's so tempo negative for you that spending your mana this way just makes sense.
Yeah, it does deny. If Jack had Fatal Push, it does really choke up his mana. That said, Steven has given away 3 damage by not playing the Greenbelt Rampager here.
That much is true.
Let's see what he wants to take. Can't take the Glint Nest Crane from Jack. Be interested to see how he goes here. You generally want to take Metalwork Colossus to stop the chain reaction here, but that card's a ways off.
If you can find a way to stop that from ever becoming the problem.
Yeah, he took Cultivator's Caravan. I like that it's a half mana denial, half Metalwork Colossus denial.
And if he's able to produce some way to supplement that, maybe another Transgress, an Appetite for the Unnatural to really slow Jack down, that'll come into play.
Big break here for Steven. The turn 2 Glint Nest Crane from Jack Keifer, putting 4 cards on the bottom of the deck. Could not find an artifact.
That's what the always said about Augur of Bolus. Look at the bottom 3 cards of your library. Glint Nest Crane is a little higher percentage than that, but you do miss sometimes.
Well, it's easier to stuff your deck full of artifacts than it is to stuff it full of instants and sorceries.
Right.
You can do both. There's really an upper bound on how many instants you can play. I guess in Standard, it's not that different with artifacts. In Modern, when your lands start becoming artifacts, this card never misses.
Right. This card has started to show up in Affinity.
Krark Clan Ironworks as well. It's good in that deck. Prophetic Prism from Keifer. And the first point of damage actually goes on to Steven. His turn 3 play was just that copy of Aether Sphere Harvester. In both these games, Steven is really playing a mid-range style strategy in these games. We saw that also in game number 1, where he was focusing on pumping his creatures more than he was focusing on just... He's trying to max value his creatures as opposed to getting damage on the board as fast as possible. I think we are seeing that again as he plays Tireless Tracker here.
Yeah, and he really does just want to be pedal to the floor.
I think so. There are matchups. He's playing this like it's a mid-range deck, which I understand, though it's costing him a lot of damage. Look at this Greenbelt Rampager that just happened on turn 4. That could have been a turn 2 play, and a lot of damage was lost when he didn't do that.
Yeah, you really just have to get in the battlefield quick. This changes a little bit if he draws some of his sideboard cards, so he does only have the 2 Appetite for the Unnatural.
Yeah. Well, Transgress was a sideboard card.
That one does matter on average less than Appetite. Appetite can be the actual huge tempo swing.
For Keifer, it's just a land and a pass. And now we look to have some damage. Another Attune picked up from Steven. See, Walking Ballista, Greenbelt Rampager, and Attune. Those are the cards in Steven's hand. And Steven's going to start with a copy of Attune. That'll bring him up to 4 energy.
Certainly wishes he had a Long Tusk Cub in this game.
Yeah, I mean, in racing matchups where your opponent is a removal light, Long Tusk Cub is the best card in this deck.
Yep, it's the heaviest hitter that you have.
Yeah, and even to a point here, the lack of Verdurous Gearhulks in Steven's side does take away some of the closing power you see out of this deck. A card like Aethersphere Harvester is very good in an aggro mirror. It's good against these token decks that are all on the ground. But as far as dishing out damage, it's not very good, especially since this deck uses a 3-power creature to crew it. It's almost not a card.
Right, yeah, unless you cast the other creature that turn. Not really doing too much. The lifelink, that's not going to really matter. A Gearhulk on this turn would be quite impressive. So Jack at 17, if he doesn't present anything, looks to be on a 2-turn clock.
A crack of a clue from Steven. Tireless Tracker up to 4-3.
Well, I guess Steven has to produce something to crew the Harvester to make that the case.
And here's Winding Constrictor. That was the draw from Steven.
It's fine.
Oh, it's good. It's good here. Definitely would play it.
Oh, yeah. I'm not advocating not playing it. Transgressor Appetite would have been better top decks, though.
Well, I can crew the snake. The snake can get on a plane here. I went a whole GB without being able to make that pun. I just wanted to make sure I got that one in. I didn't play planes.
That movie is older than I would like to admit.
I was like 5 years old, right?
I was in high school when it came out.
Yeah, that was like 5 years ago.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Swing here from Steven, goes to combat. You know, again, this is a... He's really not being aggressive in this matchup. We're seeing that looks like rather than snake crewing the plane, he's going to sit back and crack some clues.
And perhaps demonstrating some unfamiliarity with the matchup. Maybe concerned about Jack doing something like, I don't know, Fumigate on the following turn.
Yeah, Unlicensed Disintegration shoots down the Tireless Tracker, and Jack's still at a very healthy 14.
Yeah, the Prophetic Prism fixing his mana there to not take any damage to cast that.
Yeah, and he'll just pass. So it looks like Steven's he's building. You see Snake, Ballista, Greenbelt, still in hand.
And really not representing any kind of trick leaving this mana up.
Jack
he can crack his clue.
If he had a Grasp of Darkness, that we would have already seen that.
Well, not even that. Jack also just can't not play into Appetite for the Unnatural. You know,
Jack's a ramp deck. Ramp decks don't get to play around things very much.
If he has a 4-mana artifact, he's going to cast it.
Sky Sovereign from Jack shoots the 3/4 Rampager. So to be fair, in Steven's defense, he did know about Sky Sovereign. So not playing the 2/3 there does make sense.
Sure. That one's not going to be enough to take care of the Greenbelt Rampager. Right.
So we'll see if now he draws a land. Now that the Sky Sovereign is out of Jack's hand, whether Steven will adapt.
It's a little difficult for Jack to crew the Sky Sovereign. The cost is 3.
Right.
Only has 1 Glint Nest Crane as things stand.
Well, there is a Metalwork Colossus in Jack's hand, and Steven knows about it. Remember, he left that card there.
Yeah, currently discounted by 7. So, yep, that's castable.
That would work. So here is Winding Constrictor, land number 6 from Steven. He's got 2 Ballistas.
Of course, what does Steven gain by hanging on at this point?
He gets an extra counter. You know, he can make 1 Ballista on 3 this turn. He can swing in. He can make another Ballista on 3 next turn.
And
might be able to. That might be enough damage.
And in this game, Jack does not have the Kozilek's Return set up just yet.
Yeah. I do keep going back to, though, there's 6 damage on the table from that Greenbelt Rampager that turn 2. At 8, these Ballistas would be far scarier.
Oh, yes.
And it looks like what Steven's going to do is instead of making 1 Ballista on 3, he's going to make both Ballistas on 2.
Yeah, that makes his board a little bit wider.
So Aethersphere Harvester will crew. It looks like it and Greenbelt Rampager will swing. Jack's going to have to take 3. So a chump block with Glint Nest Crane will send 3 damage in. Jack will drop to 11. Steven will go ahead and give his creature lifelink.
If Steven can get himself to 22 life, that's actually a relevant threshold.
Well, right now, there's that Sanctum of Ugin in play for Jack. We have to wonder how much more non-creature artifact is in his hand. If he can is it just 1 metalwork, or can he go bigger? We'll see Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot.
This is promising on the bigger front.
Yeah, right now the Colossi, there we go, they cost 2. So with another untapped land, he could make both. Here's Aether Hub. And it looks like that will be the play. Here's Metalwork Colossus, Sanctum of Ugin trigger. And what's neat here is that Jack actually has to crew Sky Sovereign and attack this turn. If he doesn't, Steven will just start putting counters on these ballistas.
Yeah, using 4 mana to convert to 2 ballista counters when Jack doesn't have much going on his side of the battlefield, that's not going to work out well for Jack.
Yeah, so I imagine we're going to have to see a Sky Sovereign attack shooting down the Winding Constrictor.
Mm-hmm.
See Jack counting, he's at 10. Had to give away another life point for that Puzzle Knot.
And Steven's still at 19. At some point, Jack has to start closing this game.
Right. So here's Sky Sovereign, swing, shoots down Constrictor. So Snake is down, 6 damage in, Steven goes to 13. Jack with just 1 blocker. We'll see if he can survive to the next turn.
Steven produces another creature and crews that Harvester.
Greenbelt Rampager can do it right here. And this actually wasn't even necessary. I believe just a swing on the board without the Rampager was also lethal, but this certainly will be 2 and we'll be headed to a game 3.
Yes, just pumping the unblocked
pump the unblocked one.
Yep.
Yep, that was actually enough damage.
That connects for 5 in combat, and you have 5 ballista counters.
All right, so green-black energy in Steven Dykman's hand will even the games up at 1 apiece. We see that in that game, really, Steven going wide enough that even when Jack got to the point of making these Metalwork Colossus, that wasn't actually enough to stabilize him.
Yep. Yeah, you really want to be able to activate Kozilek's Return from your graveyard when you're casting those Colossus in this matchup. Frequently just casting 10/10s when you're so far behind on the board, and in particular with Walking Ballista. That actually gives this deck some reach. It's just not going to be enough in a lot of these games. Looks like both players are revisiting their sideboards. Maybe Steven's interested in some number of murder just to push through when Jack has the weaker Colossus draw.
Well, it's interesting. Certainly, it's not as good as Appetite. The question would be whether or not you'd want to use murder against something like Sky Sovereign in this matchup. It's not great, but we already talked about how he might be boarding in Gonti or something else that's not great just because he has so many dead cards. Murder may be the best option.
Right.
Yeah, on Jack's side, he did check his sideboard. It looks like no changes as he heads to the last game. We did see Unlicensed Disintegration coming in out of the sideboard there.
That's a powerful card in this matchup. A lot of large creatures on the other side. Jack not really playing a deck that cares about dealing 3 damage to the opponent, but it's a murder of his own.
All right. So we are now just 1 week away from the Hour of Devastation pre-release. Full spoiler coming online this morning. Now at Star City Games and all across the country, we have our exclusive Creature Collection playmat. This is the Owl of Devastation. You see the fearsome bird here crashing into the shores of Amonkhet. You can get this just by playing in a store near you that running a Star City Games pre-release. You can find that store at starcitygames.com/pre-release.
It is a large owl.
Just huge.
I would not mess with that.
That one parody was it. The actual flavor of the set is that Nicol Bolas basically destroying the plane of Amonkhet.
It's really innovative, creative space.
You mean the owl or the nickel bolas?
Uh,
I don't know if we've had one where a large bird destroys a plane before.
yes to both with different inflections. The owl I like a lot. I'm not talking any smack about the owl. I would play with that playmat.
Kinds of windbrisk raptor. That one's going to the things of large birds. Rime feather owl.
Yeah, Ryan Fowler, that's the one I was trying to think of the name.
The cold snap one.
Oh, yeah.
You need to play snow mana for it though.
You do. Well, only for its ability.
That's true. You don't need it to cast. You can just play it. Looks like a mulligan here, game 3 for Steven. No, Nicol Bolas coming to the plane. I believe we were placing, we had your five gods originally living in Amonkhet. From what you can tell just from the card flavor, at least 2 of them are dead. It might be all 5. And then you're getting instead the new gods, the Scorpion God, the Locust God.
I'm pretty excited about the Locust God. I don't think it's good, but it's really cool.
I don't really like locusts.
Yeah, that
I
really
mean,
doesn't
these
fall
are
into my
plagues,
evaluation.
you know, and Nicol Bolas is raining plagues on the plane of Amonkhet, which, while flavorful, I wouldn't be excited about.
I would not want that plague rained upon me if that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, that was the point. And it's going to be Renegade Map here, turn 1 for Jack Keifer. That one, a card more or less cycles it. The 1-mana artifact can usually find him a land. If he doesn't need it for his land drops, can keep it in play to help discount cards like the basically Metalwork Colossus.
Triggers Revolt for Fatal Push in a pinch.
Well, that's nice. He does it. That does work. Can sacrifice it to bring back your Metalwork Colossus. And here's going to be Glint Nest Crane from Jack. The second time this match, it's going to miss for him.
This is not what you want your 2-mana 1/3 to do.
Yeah, one of the reasons this deck playing the card because it has very few things to do with 2 and 3 mana. So as long as the Glint Nest Crane is card neutral, it seems, yeah, sure, I'll take a 1/3 while I'm busy doing nothing. When it's just a 1/3, Seacoast Drake, it's less exciting.
Jack has a lot of hits off of this. It's pretty unfortunate.
And this time we see an aggressive take from Steven. Goes for Glint Sleeve Siphoner, had the option to transgress the mind here, but he's going to make the 2/1.
Remember that Siphoner does have Menace as well, so it can attack through this Crane.
Yeah, Jack's going to play Cultivator's Caravan, and just for the reason you mentioned, he'll attack with Glint Nest Crane. No reason to hold it back as a blocker. Swing from Steven. For 2, he'll get up to 2 energy. Jack's down to 18. And here's Transgress the Mind. We'll see 2 copies of Metalwork Colossus, Hedron Archive, and another Cultivator's Caravan. This is actually pretty resilient to discard.
It is. No matter what you do, Jack's going to be able to play some Mana Rock on the following turn. For that reason, there's a pretty strong argument for taking one of the Colossus out of the hand.
Yeah, if you don't... Well, actually, things could get very bad, right? If Jack draws a land, he could play both Mana Rocks. I guess, yeah, if he took a Hedron Archive. Yeah, Jack's going to make his way to Colossus maybe in 1 turn.
I suppose, yeah, taking one of those rocks, it does push Jack back for sure. He won't be able to cast one on this turn. The question is whether Steven can beat 2.
Yeah, it means that when Jack starts playing the Metalwork Colossus, which should be on the following turn, it's going to be 1 per turn. He's not going to have that silly turn where he just plays, you know, as many as he can for free.
Yep. And taking the Archive over time, you know, that card does redraw, taking Jack off of drawing 2 cards long term.
Yeah, I don't see Cultivator's Caravan attacking very often in this deck. It's really just a Mana Rock.
Yep.
So if that's true, then Archive is just stronger.
Yep.
Now we're back to Steven. He converts the energy into an extra card.
I've always enjoyed Metalwork Colossus crewing vehicles.
Yeah, how does he fit inside?
Reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons with the really tall guy driving the Beetle.
We see appetite for the unnatural on a cultivator's caravan. Steven, a very interesting game plan here. Just going for maximum disruption using his sideboard cards.
Yeah, if you have the appetite, that
That's
makes it
nice,
really
yeah.
easy to break up, and his decision on the archive just a slam dunk.
Swing of Glint Nest Crane. Let's do a quick count here, though. It's not that far off. You see Jack has 6 mana available and 3 mana of Artifact. So he's at 9. It's not enough for the Colossus yet, but it's getting pretty close. If he draws Hedron Archive off the top, he can just make Metalwork Colossus next turn. Now, another appetite from Steven would be devastating here.
Yes. Only 2 in the 75, even still.
So Jack's still at 16. Against these ramp decks, you always have to make sure you close the game quickly. Eventually, they will just draw lands and play their payoff card. Looks like Long Tusk Cub, Walking Ballista, both in hand for Steven. Might even be another Transgress. We'll start by swinging with Siphoner, see if that's going to work out. That'll put Steven up to 2 energy. Jack will go to 14. And Steven has to be careful. Remember, he did get hit very badly by a Kozilek's Return in the first game. I'd have to think that's weighing on his mind right now.
I saw Jack's hand not that long ago, but that one could come off the top. If you can play around it, you certainly should.
So here's Long Tusk Cub, and as he has 2 energy from the Siphoner, that does play around it. Another Transgress, a Walking Ballista, another Long Tusk Cub are all among his options. And it looks like he's just going to go the aggressive route, make a second Long Tusk Cub and pass. Sanctum of Ugin, the pickup for Jack. Will bring him up to 10 mana for Metalwork Colossus. Still not enough. As he passes.
And you're seeing the reason that more people haven't played this deck historically here. When it's not doing anything, it's really not doing anything.
And this is interesting. Steven is debating his Glintlessy Siphoner trigger here. He's got to be careful. If he spends that 2 energy to draw a card, Kozilek's Return is one of the... I think is a big enough risk that we'll see him just draw a card.
And his creatures already can attack just fine into this Crane.
Right.
Doesn't need to be worried about anything like that.
I mean, I like an extra card. Don't get me wrong. I also... Ooh, this... Playing with fire, but Jack does not have it.
Bold.
Bold, but a big reward.
Fortune favors the bold.
Well, and his pickup is so good here, too. Picked up land number 5 and Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. So now is the option of Ballista on 1, or even better, he's going to transgress Jack. Takes the Metalwork Colossus. Now has Nissa, and I'd be surprised if he's not just going to -2 it.
That line makes a lot of sense to me. Making a plant here does not seem significant. I'll say that much.
No, he's going to go for Aether Sphere Harvester, getting 2 energy.
Yeah, he knows that Jack would have to peel a return off the top, and now with these Cubs connecting.
Well, maybe he's concerned, right? If you play Nissa and -2 it, then Glint Nest Crane will kill your Nissa. I guess I don't care about that.
I don't think it's doing much more than -2.
If my opponent wants to remove his own blocker, I'm pretty in.
Yeah.
But we'll see here. Looks like a block. Looks like just all the damage comes in. And Long Tusk Cub becomes a 3/3, up to 5 energy as both Cubs connect. No block from Keifer. And now even if Jack hits Colossus, it's probably not enough. He'll pass back to Steven.
And there's really not swingy ways for Jack to claw back into games with this deck.
Yes.
Not in the absence of Kozilek's Return.
Yeah, you're looking for what? Kozilek's Return, Elder Deep Fiend to win from here. Both which are in Jack's list, but neither of them are in his hand. Draw here another Attune. Another Aether Hub. Bring him up to 4 energy. This attack is likely to do it. Especially with, you see that Walking Ballista hiding out in Steven's hand. I'm pretty sure if he attunes, plays Ballista on 1, and casts Nissa, I don't think Jack can survive the turn. So he does just that. Attune's going to find him a basic land. Up to 6 energy. Can use that to pump the unblocked Long Tusk Cub.
Yeah, having 2 Long Tusk Cub is really nice in the face of only 1 blocker.
Yeah, and there's not even enough damage. Jack's actually 1 mana short of the play of Elder Deep Fiend plus Kozilek's Return emerging out of Glint Nest Crane, so he doesn't really have to play around that either.
Right.
So yeah, Walking Ballista will come into play. It will crew Aether Sphere Harvester. Everything becomes a creature. Last card in Steven's hand is Nissa. Nissa will put a counter on everything, including that Ballista up to a 2/2, Cub to a 4/4, Cub to a 3/3, Siphoner to a 3/2. This is more than enough damage. It's going to be Steven Dykman winning both sideboard games, and he's going to stay undefeated at 6-0-1.
And you can expect that this Grixis Colossus deck, it does get worse post-sideboard on average. You know, Steven cast 2 Transgress and an Appetite for the Unnatural, and Jack just wasn't able to do anything.
Yeah, sometimes out of ramp decks, you'll see, because ramp's a very difficult archetype to sideboard with, you know, you have to play your ramp spells, you have to play your finishers. You'll see ramp decks with a good mid-range sideboard plan a lot of the time. So if you think, you know, think about like a Valakut deck in Modern where they start becoming like Anger of the Gods,